Imagine for a moment a cosmic scale, wherein on one side there is all the gold in the world and on the other another, inner peace. This image is not a coincidence, as it perfectly represents the dilemma we face as a modern society. Wealth, the concept so longed for and at the same time so feared, has become the center of a spiritual debate that transcends cultures, religions, and eras. In the ancient sacred texts, we find numerous warnings about the dangers of the opulence, not because wealth is intrinsically evil, but because it acts as a mirror that reflects our true intentions in the nature of our character. It is like an amplifier that enhances both our virtues and our weaknesses, defects. In the hands of a generous soul, wealth can become into a tool for social transformation. In the hands of a spirit petty, can be an instrument of destruction. Greed, that sleeping dragon that lives in the confines of our consciousness, find in the material abundance the fuel perfect for awakening and growing. Like a seed that germinates in fertile land, this capital sin develops silently, feeding on our deepest fears. The fear of losing what we have, the fear of not being enough, the anguish of an uncertain future. But the real tragedy does not lie in the possession of wealth, but in the subtle and progressive transformation that the soul of the wealthy experiences. As the water that, drop by drop, erodes the hardest rock, material abundance can wear us down. Sensitivity toward neighbor, our sense of empathy and our connection with it truly essential. In the big cities of the world, we can observe this phenomenon in its maximum expression. Glass skyscrapers rise toward the sky like modern towers of Babel, while in their shadows they develop stories of loneliness and disconnection. The inhabitants of these temples of modern capitalism often experience a peculiar form of poverty, spiritual poverty. Their accounts banking they are full of numbers, but their hearts languish in a desert of meaning. History has taught us countless examples of how wealth can become in a prison golden. Since the pharaohs of the ancient Egypt to modern Silicon Valley moguls, the pattern repeats itself. The human being, in his search for security and power through material accumulation, can end up building his own cage. A comfortable, luxurious cage, but a cage nonetheless. This cage, although invisible to whom inhabits it, manifests itself in symptoms very recognizable. The inability to enjoy the simple pleasures of life, the constant need for validation through acquisitions materials, and the existential void that no purchase can fill. It's as if the universe, in his infinite wisdom, would have established a fundamental law. The more we cling to the material, the more we escape from it. Essence of the true happiness. Modern studies of psychology and neuroscience, they have begun to confirm what the ancient wise men already they sensed. The excess wealth can disrupt our capacity for empathy and social connection. The human brain, shaped by millions of years of evolution under conditions of scarcity and cooperation necessary, seems to disorientate in a context of extreme abundance. It is as if our internal software was not fully prepared to handle the latest version of the operating system of the modern society. The paradox deepens when we observe how many millionaires and billionaires they try to find meaning in their lives through the philanthropy. It is fascinating to see how, after decades of accumulation relentless, many they discover that the true satisfaction lies in giving, not in receive. This awakening, although valuable, often comes too late, when personal relationships already are deteriorated and the habits of a life centered on the accumulation are deeply rooted. In ancestral cultures existed rituals and practices designed specifically to counteract the corrosive effects of wealth on the human soul. The potlatch of the Native American peoples, for example, were ceremonies where the most prosperous of the tribe they gave away or destroyed their most valuable possessions. An act that today seems incomprehensible to us, but that served as an escape valve for the social and spiritual pressure that wealth can trigger. Modern technology has amplified these challenges in ways that our ancestors could never have imagined. Social networks have become digital showcases where we exhibit our material possessions and achievements, creating an endless cycle of comparison and competition. Every like and every comment feeds a need insatiable for external validation, distancing us more and more from our internal moral compass. The speed with which wealth can be accumulated in the modern world, too, has altered our perception of value and the effort. Overnight success stories in the world of cryptocurrencies, Tech startups and influencers have created an illusion that quick wealth is the normal path to success. This time warp has profound consequences in our collective psyche, eroding traditional values such as patience, the perseverance in the constant work. The phenomenon of the inheritance intergenerational wealth adds another layer of complexity to this picture. Heirs to large fortunes often find themselves grappling with the weight of impossible expectations and a feeling of being an imposter that no one amount of money can relieve. It's like the universe would have designed a particularly challenging test for those born in abundance. Finding authentic purpose when all the needs materials are covers from the principle. The exclusive spaces they frequent the wealthiest they can become enclosed ecosystems that reinforce these problematic dynamics. Private clubs, luxury developments, and elite schools create bubbles social where the perspective of the reality is gradually distorted. It's like living in the aquarium golden where the fish lose consciousness of the ocean that exists beyond its glass walls. The constant search for exclusivity and distinction can become a subtle but powerful addiction. Pleasure momentary to acquire the latest model of luxury car, the most exclusive watch, or the property in the most coveted location is fading faster and faster, creating a cycle of perpetual dissatisfaction. It's like trying to fill a well without background with drops of water golden. The impact on family relationships is particularly devastating. Wealthy parents, in his desire to provide the better to their children, they may inadvertently deprive them of experiences of struggle and overcoming necessary to develop resilience and character. Children raised in environments of extreme abundance often struggle to develop an identity separated from her family wealth. The spiritual dimension of this crisis is manifested in a peculiar form of existential alienation. When all the needs materials are more than satisfied, the fundamental questions about the purpose of life and the meaning of our existence become more urgent and, paradoxically, more difficult to respond to. It is as if excess material light will create a deeper shadow on the soul. The consumption rituals that characterize the life of the wealthiest can be seen as a modern form of idolatry. The cult of luxury, obsession with premium brands, and the search incessant of exclusive experiences are manifestations of a deviant spirituality, where materialism has become a kind of secular religion. The loneliness they experience many rich is particularly acute because it comes accompanied by the disbelief of the others. How can someone with so much suffering from loneliness? This social incomprehension deepens the isolation and can lead to a cycle of behaviors self-destructive masked by glamour and luxury. The pressure to maintain the appearances and the social status can become an unbearable burden. As actors in a permanent stage, many rich people find themselves playing roles that they have stopped reflecting his true self. This dissociation between the public persona and the inner self can lead to deep and painful identity crises. The defense mechanisms they develop the rich to protect their wealth can end up becoming in psychological prisons. Constant distrust, the fear of dissection and suspicion of others' intentions create a barrier invisible but impenetrable between them and the rest of the world. It is like living behind an armored glass that, although it protects, also isolates. The irony of this situation is that the same bulletproof glass that supposedly protects wealth ends up becoming a distorted lens through which the world is observed. Human relationships are tinged with a transactional nuance, where each interaction is evaluated in terms of potential benefits or threats. This defensive perspective contaminates even the more intimate and personal moments, turning every social encounter into a strategic calculation exercise. The gardens are perfectly maintained by the mansion's luxurious become into living metaphors of this artificial existence. Each leaf is in its place, every flower blooms according to a scheduled, but missing the beauty imperfect and chaotic of the real nature. Of the same way, the lives of the very rich may look perfect from the outside, but they lack the authenticity and the spontaneity that they give true taste of the human existence. The constant need to protect and increase wealth can become an all-consuming obsession time and the mental energy available. It's as if money, instead of being a tool to make life easier, became the gravitational center around of which revolves around the whole existence. The simple decisions become complicated with considerations financial and legal, creating a web of concerns that entangles every aspect of daily life. The advisors financiers, lawyers, and wealth managers surrounding the very rich form a kind of modern court, where each courtier has its own interests and agendas. This environment can create a sense of justified paranoia, where it is difficult to distinguish between the sincere advice and the handling interested. The abundance of resources attracts inevitably to people who are looking for take advantage of it, creating a climate of permanent distrust. The family gatherings, which should be moments of connection and joy, become intense times where they argue inheritances, investments, and strategies. Prosecutors. Children, they learn from an early age to see their relatives not only as family, but as potential competitors for family resources. This dynamic poisons the most fundamental relationships and creates scars emotional that can last for generations. The search for exclusive experiences can lead to a peculiar form of addiction, where each new luxury must exceed the previous one to provide the same level of satisfaction. Travel in private jets, the vacation in exclusive islands, and dinners in restaurants with Michelin stars become a minimum standard, creating an upward spiral of expectations that can never be fully met. Time, the only truly limited resource that we all share equally, takes on a different dimension in the world of the super-rich. Every minute must be optimized. Every moment must be superlatively productive or pleasurable. This pressure to maximize time can paradoxically reduce the ability to enjoy the present, creating a constant anxiety about missing out on something better in another place. The friendships, authentic relationships, become increasingly rare, replaced by superficial relationships based in status and the convenience mutual. The conversations genuine are replaced by calculated exchanges where each word is measured by its potential impact on the business or the social status. Emotional vulnerability, essential for forming deep human connections, is perceived as a weakness that cannot be allowed. The rituals of high society, with their unwritten codes and implicit expectations, create a constant pressure to maintain the appearances. The charity parties, galas, and social events become on battlefields where silent wars of status and power are fought. Generosity, it becomes a social currency, where the donations, they are not measured by not for its real impact, but for its advertising value. The education of the children becomes a social engineering project, where every aspect of your development must be optimized and every opportunity should be maximized. The extracurricular activities, private tutors, and enriching experiences add up in a calendar overwhelming, leaving little room for natural development and the self-discovery. The concept of work and the effort is distorted in the growing generations with extreme wealth. Work ethic, which has traditionally been a source of dignity and personal satisfaction, may seem irrelevant when all the needs materials are covers from the birth. This creates a crisis of purpose that can manifest in behaviors self-destructive or in a desperate search for meaning. Privacy, increasingly scarce luxury in the digital age, becomes into an obsession for the very rich. Every movement must be calculated considering its potential media exposure. Each relationship should be evaluated by its discretion, and every decision must be analyzed for its possible public repercussions. This constant surveillance can create a form of psychological prison where the spontaneity and the authenticity are sacrificed in the altar of the public image. This constant surveillance and the need to maintain an impeccable public image generate a significant emotional drain that few they can understand. It's like living in a glass house where every gesture, every decision, and every relationship is exposed to public scrutiny. The media and social networks amplify this exposure, creating additional pressure that can be suffocating even for the strongest personalities. The phenomenon of instant wealth, particularly common in the era of technology startups and cryptocurrencies, presents its own unique challenges. Individuals who move from a relatively modest life to the extreme opulence in a matter of months or even days, they find themselves sailing emotional and social territory for which they are not prepared. It is like being catapulted into a foreign country without knowing the language, the customs, or the unwritten rules that govern everyday life. The paradox of the free time is particularly acute among the very rich. Despite having the resources to never work again, many find themselves busier than ever, trapped in a network of commitment, social, philanthropic obligations, and financial responsibilities that consume every available moment. Free time, rather than being a space for rest and relaxation reflection, becomes another resource that needs to be optimized and monetized. Romantic relationships acquire an additional dimension of complexity in the context of extreme wealth. The search of authentic love is complicated by the ever-present suspicion of ulterior motives. The agreements prenuptial, although necessary from a practical perspective, can poison the trust and the intimacy from the beginning of a relationship. Romance becomes an illegal negotiation, where the heart has to consult with the lawyers before taking any decision. Raising the children in this context, it presents unique challenges that go beyond the simple material abundance. Rich parents find themselves in the difficult position of wanting to give your children all the advantages possible while they try instilling values of humility, hard work, and empathy in them. It's like trying to teach someone to swim in an ocean of honey. The excessive sweetness can make it difficult to learn the movements necessary for the survival. The concept of value is fundamentally distorted when the abundance is extreme. The price of things loses its meaning when money ceases to be a real limitation. This disconnection with the real value can lead to decisions irrational and a loss of perspective that affects both large investments and small everyday purchases. It's like losing the ability to distinguish flavors after consuming too much sugar. The search for the exclusiveness can become a race without end, where each new acquisition or experience must exceed the previous one to provide the same level of satisfaction. The largest yachts, the most spectacular houses, the most coveted works of art become in steps on a staircase endless towards a summit that always seems to be a step further. This constant pursuit of the superlative can create a form of existential fatigue that no one new purchase can relieve. Mental health, the traditionally taboo subject in high society circles, suffers particularly under the weight of extreme wealth. Depression, anxiety, and other psychological disorders can be exacerbated by the social isolation, the constant pressure, and lack of authentic purpose. However, seeking help professional can be complicated by concerns about the confidentiality and the fear that any sign of vulnerability can be exploited by others. The legacy becomes a concern obsessive for many rich people, not only in terms of the transfer of wealth, but also in the lasting impact they desire leave in the world. Philanthropy, although noble in his intentions, he can become in another field of competition where the donations they are measured more by their visibility than by its real impact. The question, what will be left of me when is no longer there, takes on a particular urgency when you have the resources to try to buy the immortality through buildings with the name of the donor, perpetual foundations, or projects monumental. The technology, which promises to do the easiest life, often makes it even more complicated existence of the very rich. Every new technological advance brings with it new vulnerabilities that must be protected, new threats that need to be mitigated, and new decisions that need to be made. Digital privacy becomes a constant concern, and the need to keep up to date with the latest innovations can create a form of perpetual technological anxiety. This technological anxiety manifests itself not only in the concern for the digital security, but also in the constant pressure to stay relevant in a world that is changing at a dizzying speed. The very rich find themselves in a permanent race to understand and adapt to new technologies that could affect their investments, threaten his privacy, or fundamentally alter the markets where they have built its wealth. It's like trying to stand on a platform that keeps moving and changing under your feet. Globalization has added another layer of complexity to the lives of the ultra-rich. Their interests and assets are scattered around the world, requiring constant attention to geopolitical events, changes in regulations international, and fluctuations in global markets. A political decision in Asia can affect an investment in Europe, while a crisis in South America can impact a project in North America. This global interconnectedness creates a form of hypervigilance that can be both mentally and emotionally draining. The concept of home becomes blurred when you own residences in multiple countries. The question, where are you from, becomes something complex to answer when your life is scattered across different continents. This geographical fragmentation can lead to a form of existential uprooting where no place is felt truly like home. Children who grow up under these circumstances, they can develop a peculiar form of privileged nomadism, where the abundance of options paradoxically makes it difficult developing a sense of belonging. The social responsibility that accompanies extreme wealth can become into a significant psychological burden. The awareness that your decisions and actions they can affect the lives of thousands or even millions of people may create a form of paralysis decisional. Every investment, every business project, Every philanthropic initiative must be evaluated not only by its financial return, but also by its social and environmental impact. This responsibility, although noble in its essence, can be overwhelming. The art of giving becomes into a science complex when resources are abundant. Strategic philanthropy requires a level of analysis and planning comparable to that of the largest business operations. The question is no longer simply who help, but how ensure that the aid is effective and sustainable. The very rich find themselves navigating a maze of philanthropic options, each with its own challenges and considerations, from the education up to the global health, from climate change to extreme poverty. The friendships of the childhood and extended family relationships suffer profound transformations with the accumulation of extreme wealth. The economic abyss that is created can trigger discomfort and distance in both directions. The family gatherings become in social navigation exercises where every interaction is loaded with unspoken economic subtexts. Maintain the authenticity in these relationships, it requires a conscious and constant effort on the part of all involved. The education of the following generation becomes in a highly complex social engineering project. Rich parents are torn between the desire to give their children all the advantages possible and the need to ensure that they develop resilience, work ethic, and empathy. The world's most prestigious schools, the most qualified tutors, and the most enriching experiences combine in an educational program that can be as privileged as it is isolating. Management of domestic staff and personal support team creates a complex social dynamic within the home. The need to maintain boundaries professionals while these people are depended on for the more intimate aspects of everyday life can create tensions and conflicts subtle but significant. Privacy becomes a relative concept when you are constantly surrounded by people who know every detail of your daily life. The concept of free time is fundamentally transformed when hijab ceases to be an economic necessity. The question, what do with your life, takes on an existential urgency when all the options are open. Many rich people find themselves trapped in a paradox where the total freedom of choice becomes in a form of psychological prison. The absence of external limitations can make it harder to find direction and purpose. Health becomes an optimization project where the best specialists, the most advanced treatments, and the most innovative techniques are always available. However, this abundance of medical options can create a form of high-level hypochondria, where every minor symptom can trigger a cascade of consultations, tests, and treatments. Longevity becomes an investment project where each lifestyle decision is evaluated for its potential impact on the life expectancy.